Tonight on The Late Debate, battle lines are drawn for the election that was never meant to happen. The London candidates fighting for seats in the European Parliament.
Do you want Nigel Farage to represent you, or do you want the Labour Party to beat the Brexit Party? It's a two-horse race, essentially.
If just over a week from now you're elected an MEP, how surprised would you be?
I would be extremely surprised, maybe fall over, faint.
And is rising knife crime linked to teenagers excluded from the classroom? We talked to the London MP saying something has to change. Good evening. In a week's time, the polls will have just closed in the European elections. But how do you persuade people to vote when the new MEPs may never actually take their seats in the European Parliament? They should have been on the endangered species list, but far from facing extinction, London's MEPs have been given a lifeline thanks to the election that was never meant to be. Labour's Claude Moraes has been a London MEP for 20 years. He's in no doubt who Labour's enemy is in this election, and it's not the Conservatives.
Do you want Nigel Farage to represent you, or do you want the Labour Party to beat the Brexit Party? It's a two-horse race, essentially.
Is Labour a Remain party or a Leave party?
Labour is a party that will offer a referendum if we can't get a decent deal, and believe me, we're not getting a decent deal as we see it at the moment.
Nigel Farage's new Brexit party is the big unknown. It's less than 6 months old.
We have to light a fire under the government to make sure, and Parliament, I have to emphasise government and Parliament, to make sure the MPs deliver on what the popular vote is.
The Conservatives probably have most to fear from the Brexit party, and Tory candidate Joy Morrissey knows who she blames: MPs in her own party.
We have a lot of MPs that are voting Remain despite what their constituencies voted for. They're just doing whatever they feel is right rather than what the country voted for.
If just over a week from now you're elected an MEP, how surprised would you be?
I would be extremely surprised, maybe fall over, faint.
The UKIP leader Gerard Batten has been a London MEP for 15 years and is standing again despite his party's opposition to the EU. He declined our request for an interview, but has made it clear he regards the election as a referendum.
Whatever the different political parties say, it is inevitably going to come down to a vote of do you want to leave or do you want to remain?
The Lib Dems, bolstered by good results in local elections earlier this month, are hoping to become the natural home of Remain voters in London. But so too are Change UK and the Greens, and they've been unable to agree on a shared strategy.
As for the other parties, it's a shame. We wanted to work with them. It would have been a lot better if we could, because we'd be able to get more pro-European MEPs in the Parliament. But alas, those talks didn't work out. So now people need to get behind the Liberal Democrats in order to send a strong message and take the fight to Nigel Farage.
Change UK offers the chance to reform our political system, to occupy the middle ground, the common sense middle ground of politics, and also to do the best for London, because Londoners will be poorer with any version of Brexit.
We have returned a Green MEP for the last 20 years. London has always re-elected Greens, and we've got no reason to see why that should change.
Whoever London voters choose, there is one question none of them can answer: how long will their job last? There are a total of 10 parties and 11 independents standing in London in next Thursday's European elections. The polls are open from 7 a.m. until 10 p.m, but the results will not be declared until Sunday evening, when the last country in the European Union has finished voting. Now, to discuss those elections and what they mean for London, I'm joined by the Labour MP for Brentford and Isleworth, Ruth Cadbury, the Conservative MP for Bromley and Chislehurst, Bob Neill, and for the Liberal Democrats by Baroness Meryl Hossain-Ejei. Meryl, first of all, can I ask you, your party lost its only seat in London 5 years ago. If the Lib Dems are resurgent, you presumably expect to get at least one. How many are you going to win?
Well, I think we'd get more than one. We're doing very well at the moment. We're doing, running along 19%, which is a very good result for us so far. I think on the back of the successful council elections that we've had, we won over 700 more council seats. I think we're really, it's acting as a springboard for us, because our message is getting through. It's getting through because we're very clear. We're saying the vote for us because we believe in Remain, and we also believe that when a deal is finally agreed, if one is ever agreed, that should be put to the people, or the option to remain. I think the other parties are just being very unclear, and people don't like confusion, they like clarity.
Certainly on clarity, Ruth, you can't exactly say Labour is clear, can you? Are you a Remain party or a Leave party?
Well, I'm a Remainer, so are
What about your party?
Well, our party's working for the best deal out of Brexit, but this election isn't about Brexit. This election is to vote for the MEPs who will represent the UK in Brussels for as long as
for
we
seats
stay in
that
the
are going to be
EU.
abolished if we leave.
Only if we leave, and obviously I've been campaigning to ensure that we don't leave, and that's why we want to have another referendum where the people of the UK can actually determine this. But in terms of who to vote for, if people like me want us to remain, and I think the majority of people in London and the South East do want to remain in the EU, then it's a straight fight this election between Farage's party and the Labour Party, because
if you're right, Ruth, Bob, what's happened to the Conservative Party? You're off the map.
Well, I don't accept that proposition because, for a start, Farage's party, including some of us might say some rather odd characters, has no seats in Parliament. They can do nothing to deliver actually on the referendum result either way. They're an irrelevant.
But you must worry that they're going
Commons.
to win seats in London, and that's going to send a message.
Under a proportional representation system, yes, they may well win seats in the European Parliament, but that won't be for very long. But the point is that only a majority in the House of Commons can deliver the Brexit that a majority voted for. I was a Remainer, but I accept the outcome, and therefore it's my party and the Conservative government that has actually put on the table the only clear plan so far for a withdrawal agreement to withdraw with a deal. We must have a deal. It would be very damaging for London for us to leave without a deal, for the impact it would have on industry and also on security and law and order cooperation with Europe, but only we can deliver that. And Farage's party is irrelevant to that, because none of his people are going to be in the room where those decisions are taken.
Errol, have you messed up by not doing a deal with the other Remain parties, and you're going to split the Remain vote?
I don't think so. I think we offered the hand of, a deal if they wanted to come on board and join forces with the Remain parties, or parties that are committed to Remain. And of course that didn't happen. Change UK weren't interested. But, I think the population do like political parties to work together on these big issues. We've offered that handout. It hasn't been accepted. We didn't come to it. So I think we're very clear that we'll carry on now as the strongest Remain party, very clear Remain party in these elections.
But as your piece quite clearly said, the smaller parties, with this kind of PR system, the D'Hondt system, the counting will not favour those parties. It'll only favour the leading parties. And if this is, and we see this election as a straight fight between Farage's party and the Labour Party, the two strongest parties at the moment.
You probably agree that.
And anybody who's a Remainer who wants to see Remain and strong progressive MEPs in Brussels representing us, then they should vote Labour, because voting for one of the other Remain parties will be a wasted vote and will help
But
Farage.
the public don't see that. The public don't see Labour, with respect. I mean, the public don't see Labour as a Remain party. Only this morning I heard John McDonnell was being asked this very clearly, and he said, "Are you for a people's vote to Remain?" He said, "Well, we want a general election
But our MEP candidates are, and they're the ones standing in the election next
you were
week.
about to say-
I was about to say there is a confusion, let's be frank, on the Labour side, and I think, Ruth, perfectly honestly, highlights that up. There's a distinction between the position of the MEP candidates and the leadership. But an awful lot of people, myself included, do take the view that whilst they might have preferred to have remained at the referendum, they do believe above all that we need to get this sorted out, that the uncertainty and the delay is damaging businesses, it's damaging people's livelihoods, and the only way to do that is to leave with a deal. And I think, therefore, it's sensible for me to say to them, support Conservative MEPs who will work with the government in trying to deliver that deal so we leave
You
by
have a real
agreement.
problem, though, in London, don't you? Because it's a Remain city, you don't appeal to Remain voters, and your Brexit voters feel betrayed by you.
Well, I think we actually can and should and will appeal to the pragmatists on either side who think whatever their view at the referendum, a decision was taken, we have to deliver on it, but we have to deliver on it in a practical way, not a rigidly ideological way of either saying, absolutely no Brexit, just forget about the referendum, you can't do that, or walk out the door without a deal.
Can I ask all three of you briefly, is this going to be seen as a new referendum?
I think it should be seen as an election because the MEPs elected will be voting for the European Commission President and the legislation as long as we remain in the EU. That's why it's really important. We can't let Farage have too many, we can't let him have any more MEPs.
Meryl, do you think it's a referendum, Liz?
I think it will be. I mean, people said
it's going to be seen as a referendum,
I think people said that, but people said the local elections wouldn't be, but they were in effect.
It'll be seen as a referendum, but it will not in truth be that. Yeah. And we'd be playing into Farage's hands if we allow it to.
Can I bring you to one other Brexit-related development today? We've heard from the 1922 committee chairman, Sir Graham Brady, about his meeting with Theresa May, which appears to set a timetable for her departure. Let's listen to what he had to say.
She is determined to secure Britain's departure from the European Union, that she is focused on securing the second reading of the withdrawal agreement bill, and that will take place in the week commencing the 3rd of June, and that following that second reading, she and I will meet to agree a timetable for the election of a new leader.
Has she set a date for departure, or should she kick the can down the road again?
No, I think she's set a sensible timetable forward, and it's simply this. It's right and proper, I think, that we, as I said before, try and leave with the deal. The best hope of doing that is through the withdrawal agreement bill passing. If that can be achieved, she's always made it clear from the beginning that once she's dealt with the first stage of Brexit, she'll hand on the torch to someone else, and I respect her for that. And meeting immediately after the second reading, which will be in that week, will enable us to set out a timetable in accordance with our constitution.
Ruth,
right? That's fair.
You presumably can't wait to see the back of her, whatever happens next.
Well, I'm not sure I want the alternatives, which at the moment, I think as of today, includes Boris Johnson, who was an embarrassment internationally to the UK when he was Foreign Secretary. And he was a pretty bad mayor of London, and the appalling Garden Bridge proposal where he wanted to favour his friends and cost Londoners a fortune. Thank goodness it's been scrapped by Sadiq Khan.
Boris has said today that he will run in the leadership race.
Will
he get your vote?
I don't think that comes as a complete surprise that Boris is going to run. There are many very good people who I think will stand. I think it's seemly to wait until Theresa has actually formally announced her withdrawal. But what I want to see is a candidate.
Not endorsing Boris.
I want to see a candidate, we're going to have many to choose from, who makes sure that we remain a pragmatic, progressive One Nation party. I've been a One Nation Conservative all my life. I think it's very important we have someone who actually gives leadership, who doesn't fall off to drift off to the left as the Labour Party has done, but is prepared to stand up for a sensible deal for Britain.
Meryl, when Boris Johnson ran as mayor, he proved that he could reach out to voters from other parties. Do you fear him?
I think I think he'd be dangerous to be in such a position. I think he showed as Foreign Secretary, one of the senior positions of, office in this country, that he was completely incompetent, and it was an embarrassment, as Ruth has said. But I just go back to what Bob has said, and the Conservative Party, who are meant to be running this country, are so self-absorbed in their own internal politics and divisions. There are so many issues in this country that people are fed up with. That really, you had an issue. You'll have an item on knife crime. All sorts of things that Londoners particularly really want tackled, and because the Conservative Party is so absorbed in this leadership problems and their inability, the shambolic negotiations on coming to a deal, nothing else is being done, and I think that's what people really care about.
Well, can I ask you just briefly, when do you think Theresa May will go?
I would think that it would be done before the summer now. That would make sense if the timetable is set after the withdrawal agreement bill's second reading. And to take up the point that's just made, I agree, we want to move on and talk about all the other things that matter to people, not just Brexit. And that applies to should apply to any political party. And probably having got
and you can all agree on
agreement,
that, I presume.
That's a good stage for her to move on.
Absolutely.
And we all need to do that.
Ruth, Bob, Meryl, thank you very much indeed for coming in to talk to us tonight. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Now, how do you tackle the scourge of knife crime in the capital? Does the answer lie in the classroom? London's depressing murder rate has laid bare a disturbing trend. Too many victims, too many of their killers are children or barely adults, some still at school. 6 of the teenagers stabbed to death this year were under 18. In the search for clues about why, questions are being asked about the link between violent crime and children excluded from school.
the education system in England is quite fragmented. You've got maintained schools, academies and free schools, and many counsellors we speak to aren't quite aware of what's happening in their patch. Head teachers, for very good reasons, sometimes have to exclude children. The concern is whether those children are receiving the support they need.
Do you know why we're here today?
In some schools, police officers are now a familiar sight. In London, more than 400 officers have been assigned to the classroom. So are excluded pupils more at risk? Head teachers say that's too simplistic.
What schools do in excluding some pupils is keep many more safe, and they still need the right and the ability to do that. But what schools really need is properly funded support from the police, from local authorities and other areas, because if they can't get access to that, then it's very, very difficult for schools to support those pupils who are really at risk of exclusion.
In the search for answers to London's knife crime epidemic, MPs think the possibility of a connection between excluded pupils and violence is worth investigating. Joining me now to discuss this is the Chair of the Education Select Committee and Harlow MP, Robert Halfon. Rob, welcome. First of all, do you think there's a link between knife crime and school exclusions?
Well, we don't have evidence yet if there's a causal link, but what we do know, there's a strong correlation between children excluded and children who get involved in knife crime. We also know that something like 65% of prisoners have been excluded from school. So clearly there is a problem. Exclusion is one of the major social injustices in our education system. And you have 40 children a day excluded from our classrooms. Something like over 4,000 children with special educational needs are excluded every single school week, either permanent or fixed exclusions, every school week from our schools. So something is deeply wrong.
Can you sympathise with heads, though, who have to maintain discipline, have to protect other pupils?
Of course. So I'm not against zero tolerance for drugs, for crime, and there will always need to be children who are excluded. But we had Michael Wilshaw, former Chief Inspector of Ofsted, at our committee. He said, for the most part, it's better if the child stays at the school, and what the school should have are properly staffed, properly trained learning support units. It's much better for the child to stay in the environment that he's used to. But the other problem we have is even if the child is excluded, often we don't know where they're at. Alternative provision is quite patchy. There is some good state alternative provision, some brilliant work being done, but there's not enough of it. It's often not in the areas where most children are excluded.
You mentioned Ofsted. Ofsted's not convinced about the link between exclusions and violence.
Well, they're not. No one is sure about the causal link. So I've never said there's a causal link, but there is definitely a correlation. You look at the people the children who are excluded, or pupils or students who are excluded, and those that go on to be part of gangs, commit knife crime or end up in prison. There is a huge correlation.
So what's the answer? You talk about special units within schools. That all sounds very expensive.
Well, a number of things need to happen. We need to have accountability, and the government have actually realised this in the Timpson review. We recommended it in our committee. Accountability from the schools so that they are accountable for the children that they exclude, at least partly, when they go on to alternative provision. We need better trained staffed teachers who are training should spend part of their time in alternative provision schools. We need post-16 alternative provision. There's very little of it across the country. We need to make sure there is not off-rolling informal exclusions from our schools.
All of this is going to cost money. Can you convince your government to spend more?
Well, the government just published the Timpson review, which recognised many of these problems, recognised many of the recommendations our Education Committee had made, and has said that they're going to support it. It has to be properly resourced, absolutely.
Pupils learning self-defence, police officers in classrooms. It seems that crime's on the curriculum. Should we be depressed, or is that just a fact of life?
Well, actually, I welcome. I think there should be more police at schools, not there they're basically there as mentors and guiders and helping pupils who have difficulties. I think that is. I've seen some incredible charitable programmes where they get police into schools. I've seen it in my own constituency of Harlow. So we should have more than that. But we do face some very difficult issues in our society today. There's a lot of work being done. Why is mental health on the rise, for example, amongst children? But we've got to deal with this problem of exclusions, because many of these children are ending up on the streets. They're not always getting into good alternative provision. They get very poor GCSE exam results, and we are denying these people a chance of a good education and a good life.
How do we turn the corner from firefighting problems like violence in society, and particularly in less well-off communities, to aspiration?
Well, we need to transform the way we look at social justice in our country. The Prime Minister said when she got in that we would deal with burning injustices, and we still face major social injustice, partly because of the fog of Brexit that seems to have swamped everything. But there is not enough attainment amongst children from vulnerable backgrounds. Not enough of them are going to do apprentices. Not enough are going to do higher degrees at universities. And what I want to see is a ladder of opportunity to every child. Education, my area, which in my committee, is possibly the greatest ladder of opportunity you can give to young people, because it can transform their lives. You give them the skills, you give them the training, you help them climb up the ladder, and at the top of the ladder is job security and prosperity.
I think you've even suggested the Tory party logo should be a ladder.
I think that our whole being is about the ladder of opportunity, but we don't just expect people to climb up themselves. We want to bring people to the ladder, we hold the ladder, we help them climb up each rung, and there's a social ambulance at the bottom in case they fall. But we have to give people that ladder of opportunity. I would like to offer every single young person over the age of 16 a guaranteed apprenticeship, just like they do in other countries. Earn while you learn, no debt, no student loan, virtually guaranteed to get a job at the end of it.
You mentioned Theresa May's promise when she went into Downing Street. It looks like she's not going to be around long enough to fulfil that. What would you like to hear from the next Conservative leader which would make you convinced that they're the right person to pursue a social mobility agenda?
Well, funny enough, I always think the word social mobility sounds like a Vodafone television advert. When I ask my constituents, no one knows what that means. What I want the next Conservative leader to do is to say that, not just say, but do, to make sure that social justice, addressing all the social injustices in our country, of which there are many, is their number one priority, particularly in education, because that is the greatest transformer. If you give people skills, you give people education, you give them job security and prosperity.
Do you have in mind a name of who that Tory leader might be?
I want to see what they're going to say first. I think, what is the next Conservative leader going to do for the country? What are they going to do to transform the Conservative Party to make it a party that helps those most in need, to be on the side of those struggling? What are they going to do on a host of other, on housing, on skills, on social care? I want to hear what they're going to do first before I make my decision.
Robert, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you to all my guests tonight. I'll be back next month when we'll no doubt be digesting the fallout from those European elections. Until then, thank you for watching and good night.